Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Flowline. Matt Offenbacher and I are back in the studio for another episode here. We always kind of end the episode by saying, if anyone has any good questions or thoughts, reach out. Again, this is one where we had a listener reach out and ask a really interesting question, not necessarily on the technical side, but more on just the communication between mud company and operator. And it's very relevant, and it's something we deal with on a day-to-day, and we'll dive into the details here. But again, if anyone out there has any thoughts or questions, if you're a listener who's been listening for a while and there's something that we haven't discussed that may pique your interest, or you want us to dive into anything further, please reach out. That's, again, the best episodes come from the listeners asking good questions. We're close to over 300 episodes at this point, and so while there's always something to talk about, sometimes we can't think of everything, and so help from the listeners is always great. And so with that being said, Matt, anything before we dive in, anything cool and exciting going on in your world during the holidays, or maybe work stuff, or any cool series you're watching? I mean, what's the latest, man?
Well, so it takes me a very long time. I don't watch a ton of TV, but I've been watching The Wire.
Classic.
Fun background story you guys don't get to hear much about, but I've been doing some weightlifting, which hopefully the video reflects
most definitely
effectively. Doctor recommended it. It's not like I'm trying to get yoked or anything, but because Justin is such a fitness guru, he's been giving me all these tips, and so sometimes before or after episodes, he'll make recommendations or tell me what to do. But one thing is, I've had a bit of a sore elbow.
Okay.
And I think it's just tendonitis. It doesn't affect my lifts or anything, but as a runner, I know you take care of those things before they get worse. Mm-hmm. So while I'm icing my elbow at night, I was watching The Wire, which I think is the best police drama ever.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for a while, but I just watched some of what I'm on, like season 3, episode 9 or 10.
Okay.
Man, it is just such a great show. But it is also very, like, early aughts or whatever, where, like, things happen where you're like, just call someone on a phone. And, or, like, everybody's working off of phones, or, like, the little, Nokias or whatever. So
that's great.
But really enjoying that, but also feeling my age as I watch it.
Yeah, no kidding.
So there's that, and then... looking forward to just enjoying the weather, bike rides with my oldest, and we got a lot of software stuff we're working on here at a lot of rollouts of exciting things. So that's work-wise. But Justin, how about yourself?
Yeah, real quick on the software and that front, next year is going to be fire, as my kids would say. A lot of great things we're working on, and so I don't want to give too much of a tease, but I'm sure if any mud engineers out there have had fluid optics roll out on their rig, that's exciting. The high optics. So really just tying everything together to be more, just technologically advanced. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but it is it's fascinating, because I think that's the next step into the future of drilling fluids is collecting more data, using that data for better insight and better decision making, and just further optimizing what we do and how much value we bring to the operator, especially with how many wells we're drilling on a daily basis. But that's exciting. On the personal front, it's crazy. I thought this winter was going to be a break. We're that sort of stereotypical family where our kids are heavy into sports, so every night is something. We love every minute of it. Our kids do too. But it went from, we might have a break, to then, baseball winter season. So we're doing 2 days a week on that. And then it's my son playing, basketball. And then my daughter's doing flag football, which I'm coaching, which I said I was never going to coach again. So I'm doing that. And then she's hitting and pitching and other things. So it's just been like nonstop. But with the newborn, it's funny because she gets drug around to all these things. But we were burning up some vacation days during the holiday yesterday. I was at a coffee shop with a buddy. Shout out to JP Warren. We got to connect and hook up after several months of not hanging out. And we're at this little coffee shop in Katy called Vogs. We're hanging out, and all of a sudden my wife comes in, and she didn't even know we were there. And so we got to all hang out. Yeah. And the baby, there was like 3 different people in the coffee shop that were like, "Oh my goodness, your baby, can I hold her?" And so yeah, she was like being handed around like a hot potato, and of course she was loving it. She didn't mind. Which our other 2 kids, if she would have held, like I had a hard time holding them because they would freak out. But because she's been exposed to just so much activity and random people holding her,
here we go again.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I'm being handed off again. So that it's good in some ways. So yeah, that's basically it. But we're going to Oklahoma City soon. That's our Christmas trip.
On purpose.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we have some mid-gone guys I work with that I love to rib on, but
yeah, well, it's business mixed with pleasure, and he won't mind me saying his name. I bet one of my really close friends, John David Willamon's graduating with his MBA from OU.
Wow. Congrats! I mean, I'll send him a text or something. But great guy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He and so his family's invited us up, so our whole family's gonna go up there and celebrate and wish him happy graduation and all the best. And then we're actually gonna do the softball museum. My daughter actually, OU is on one of the teams that she wants to go play for at one point. Which
shortlist?
Yeah. OU, the Longhorns. She's got like 3, and so she's excited to see the campus. And as a 10-year-old who has aspirations to play college softball, going to OU is kind of at the tippy top. So anyway, it'll be a cool little trip, and that'll be it, and then back home for Christmas. But that's kind of what's going on this holiday season. But
awesome.
It's all been well. But with that said, we're going to dive into the great question that was asked. Matt, why don't you go ahead, sort of outline it, and give the background on it, and then we'll start chatting about it.
Yeah, I mean, just LinkedIn conversation, and this comes from somebody who provides some drilling fluid products and is trying to learn as much as he can about the industry. And I always like it when they reach out to us. It means maybe our podcast is educating another mind for the industry. But that being said, he said, how much back and forth is there between operators and fluid companies and operational decisions? What kind of constraints does AES have to follow, and how do they balance operators' wishes with their expertise? And I mean, this is like a loaded, there's no yay or nay. It depends, like we always say.
Yeah.
Anyways, Justin, why don't you kick it off with just a little bit of context of how it depends?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is where are you at in the drilling campaign, right? So if we just sort of pretend and say, okay, we're starting to work for a newer company, and maybe a company we haven't worked for, there's a lot of back and forth. Maybe, if they haven't drilled in a particular area, they may lean on us if we have, because there's a good chance that if someone wants to use AES, it's because of the experience we have in a given area. So let's just use that as, say, like a scenario a lot. There's, then they're leaning on us for information, and we may, I say that because I remember when a customer of ours had reached out, and there was a particular area that they were drilling in the Permian. They were basically a company that had just started. This was like 2018, and they literally asked us, hey, how do you guys drill this from top to bottom? And a real good account manager out in Midland and I went up to Denver, and we basically walked through a well with them and told them every interval, here's what you're going to expect, here's what kind of equipment you need, you'll need this, you'll need that. And so they lean on us heavily. Whereas then some other customers, they've been drilling for a while, they're adding a rig, and they've already drilled 50, 60 wells. Well, then there's not a lot, because they kind of have they've already gone through the growing pains. They'd already leaned on different companies and services to kind of put the pieces together, and they've got a program, and they're like, okay, we're in manufacturer mode, we just need someone to do this as efficiently or even more efficiently than what we've already been doing. So then there's not as much sort of asking for our expertise on sort of that like macro level. So clearly it depends. Anyway, we can walk through some other stuff, but I mean, How would you add to that, I guess, Matt?
Well, I think from the relational perspective, I know you did an interesting study a while ago just talking about how costs go down over time as you build a relationship with a customer.
Yeah.
Because, for example, ultimately it is the operator's well, right? They pay the bills, and so we can make our recommendations, and they have the choice to listen or to not listen. And we do our best to build enough trust and credibility that if we think it's the right thing, that we can convince them that it is the right thing.
Yeah.
But, there's even, as much as everybody says, these wells, we just, bash them out, like, different operators have different preferences, and it may not be standardized. It could come down to the drilling engineer. It could come down to some things in the field. And once we understand better some of those nuances, we might say, in light of how you choose to do this, we recommend this.
Yeah.
And so it's a little harder to standardize some of the things you don't write in a MUD program.
Yeah.
And operationally, sometimes, it can be, very obvious data-driven stuff. Customers ask us about mud weights all the time. They're
right.
With our analytics platform and everything, we've been able to point out, like, hey, you're like 3 pounds heavier than what anybody else has done around here. Like, you may want to go back to your geologist and talk about this.
Yeah.
And so those are pretty cut and dry. Like, here's some offset data that tells me you should do something different than you were planning.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there's not a ton of debate about that, but once again, that is a choice our customer makes.
Right. And no matter how much trust you've built with a given customer, you're never at a point where you're going to dictate what they do. It's going to be very consultative, right?
Yes.
Hey, based off of this, here's what we've seen. We'd suggest doing this. Okay, great. Let's roll with it. Or, and that's sort of a lot of times of the conversation. But I think, too, a big piece of it is how much experience does the drilling and management team have? A lot of, over the last several years, the management teams and drilling engineers and even drilling managers have become younger and younger.
Yes.
So I've seen where they oftentimes lean on service companies that have a fair amount of market share as like, hey, you guys are the experts and we know that. And so you just tell us what you're thinking and we'll all get together and agree to it or disagree. And so a lot of it depends on that. But then it also, if, let's say you're a large company, like a big publicly traded company where you've got several folks sort of overseeing one project, you might not have as much say because they have a team of people who are making decisions, and they send us a MUD program, and then next thing you know, a drilling superintendent's calling the shots on what to do, and you're just sort of there to make sure that you follow suit. But in the original comment I had is if there's a management team or a drilling team that doesn't have quite the experience, a lot of times they'll hire very seasoned field folks who then they dictate, and they don't want to hear anything.
Yes.
And I'm saying that kind of comically, but when you've got a gentleman, say from southeastern Oklahoma, who's drilled there for the last 28 years, there's a lower probability that he's going to call me up and say, how do you think we should drill this, Justin? He's going to already have, or she's going to already have her own sort of methodology and procedure and how the mud should be ran. So again, it's so nuanced. And so we, as the vendor, have to do a good job of doing our research and studying that dynamic. Because what you don't want to do is have so much conviction where you challenge someone enough to where then they say, excuse me,
I'm in charge.
Yeah.
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 No, and it is one of those, like, certainly you can totally believe in something. And this can come back with data. This is where you try and say, look, here's what we know about this area or this formation. It can be lab data. It can be offset information. Here's a technical paper. Here's, some other things, and this is why we're recommending this. And even in a KPI, like sometimes I try, and this requires tact, right? But to say, look, you said you wanted to lower your costs. Well, pumping sweeps every connection is costing you $30,000 in Bayrite. That is a choice you have made. Here's my hydraulics. Here's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity, but I also want to mark this point in time as an inflection point where you're either sort of choosing to spend that extra money because you believe that is best for your program, and we will support it. But when you come back to us and talk about cost-saving opportunities, please don't get mad if this comes up. Like we understand you're in charge, but understand also that like when we're under this pressure, and we find there's some easy wins here, we just want to make sure we're on the right side of this so that some new guy doesn't come in and say, well, why weren't you doing this whole time? Or, we run into stuff like that all the time where we sort of get ingrained in like, that's the decision. Don't fight it.
Right.
And then somebody else is like, why weren't you guys? And it's like, there's history here.
Yeah.
And you're not always necessarily in that conversation, but,
No.
and it's like you said, some customers are very specific. I want this, this, and this. We're going to run this mud system. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then others are like, hey, we've been having some problems. What do you think? Can you look into it?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll be even like, look, I don't really even think this is your issue. I'd like you to do something.
Yeah.
And so, we'll pursue that.
Yeah.
I've also been amazed. It's been few and far between in my career, but where I've gotten in front of a customer, something's happened. There was a very big gas well I was involved in overseas, and we took a kick, and I walked into the drilling superintendent's office. Like, I was in lunch, got the call, like walked straight over to their office, which was across the street.
No.
I'm like still walking towards the drilling manager, and I'm saying, and he stops me, just holds up his hand, Matt. He goes, I didn't understand anything you said. He goes, but frankly, I trust you, and I know you're going to do the right thing, so I want you to go do it, and you tell me if anybody gets in your way. And it was like, okay, this is like well controlled, like this is a serious thing, and obviously, like I wanted to make sure he understood, but it was very nuanced. We spent a lot of time building the relationship because this was a big well, so there was 6 to 12 months of planning that went into it. And so anyways, it was one of those like, okay, that's kind of like the ultimate level of trust where the operator basically is giving you a blind mandate, but that does not happen often at all.
And quite the contrary, my story with that is I actually got threatened to get run off of a job when I was offshore, and because there was such little amount of trust that the company man had in me, he actually threatened to kick me off the rig because he thought I locked him out of the bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah, so totally opposite experience.
Different.
I wish I was in your position, not being threatened to get ran off because I locked the bathroom door on him, which come to find out he actually locked the bathroom door. And so
Did he own up to that?
No.
Oh.
No. Someone found out or something, I don't know, but he never admitted it, and he proceeded to try and run me off, which he actually wasn't able to. Thankfully, I had enough folks on the rig who said, no, he's actually a pretty decent hand, like, let him go. I don't know. He had something against me. But nonetheless, you can see the different variations of trust here, the different spectrums. You want to be on Matt's side of that fence.
Well, I probably told this story before, too. This was another offshore experience, in the Middle East. Get sent out to the rig, and I'm the subject matter expert for this new technology. They already, the operator has their own mud engineers. I'm just supposed to help make sure this thing gets delivered. I get out there, and immediately the company man says, we're not doing any of the things in this program. And I said, all right, when's the next chopper out of here? And he was like, wait, what? I was like, I only came here, like I flew halfway across the world. I only came here to make sure this is successful.
Yeah.
If you're not going to even do, like, if you don't need me, then I get to go home. Like this does not hurt my feelings. And he's like, whoa, wait. It was one of those, like, I kind of like called his bluff, but at that point, like, I think he was testing me, and at the same time, it was one of those where because there were it was a big project, and this was sort of like go time, immediately telling me like, we're not going to do this. It was like, well, I mean, look, I don't want to be part of something that fails. Just send me home. Right. And it was like, whoa, wait, what do you mean? And I think he saw my indifference where it was like, 15 hours of flying each way, but shy of that, like, and ultimately, we got along a lot better and sort of got on the same page. But I had a lot more operational influence because it was different. Yeah. And because of other people's involvement than a lot of what we see on land where, you may even convince the office. And what we find, like, to your point, we're seeing a lot of guys who broke out in the 90s working as drilling consultants at the rig. And many of them have a set of preferences. And even if the young office engineer says, that's great, thanks for the recommendation, I'm bought in, the field won't do it. Yeah. And so we've found we've had to do a lot more to get buy-in from the field than we ever have.
Yeah. When, kind of going back to the actual question, what constraints do you have? I think that's where the constraint oftentimes comes up the most is you may have, again, just the disconnect between the office and the field, which has been like that ever since I broke out on a rig as a roughneck. I mean, the tool pusher would say, yeah, this is what the office wants, but we're going to do this. And I didn't really understand at the time. Like, all right, boss, whatever you want. Like, but now looking back, it's like, man, that's always been a challenge.
Yeah.
And part of that too is what really makes it challenging is, if you've been drilling in an area with a given customer and they swap out folks and bring people in from a different basin, they then try to take what they've learned in other basins and adopt it into this basin. And then they're sort of wanting to dictate, hey, we're going to run this, we're going to start doing that. And it's like, well, wait, like we've got like years of data, like supporting how well we've done doing this. And then they don't want to hear it. And so you're like, well, here's the risk and trade-off. If we do that, there's a cost. And then, you still are left with only advising, which you cannot just say, no, this is how we're doing it. So you get kind of caught in this weird sort of, I guess, just back and forth. But that, when it comes to constraint, it's between the field and the office can oftentimes be the biggest constraint.
Yeah, and I think more broadly, like the nature of customers, right? So you don't want to come across as somebody who's just trying to cover your behind every time someone wants to do something that you think is a bad idea. But the flip side, and sometimes even if you didn't want to do it, you'll be held responsible for it. And sometimes, you just got to take it on the chin and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do to make it right. Or it could be a situation where, you're in the penalty box because something happened and you've got to reorient that trust. But I think, one of our big challenges is like, you want to make sure that the customer, recognizes they've been heard. You want to be accountable, and you want to keep the relationship.
Yeah.
And so it may even be that it's something you're like, look, I think this is a bad idea. But if you go to too great lengths to point out that it's a bad idea, that can get you in a lot of trouble. Or, you're trying too hard to cover your tracks or what have you.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is, with how busy our customers are, sometimes you got to, like, hey, can I just send an email that we have this understanding?
Yeah.
Like, you'll never hear any more about this, but I just don't want months down the line it to be, well, you did this, and, like, let's just make sure everybody understands where we're at here.
Yeah.
And those are awkward because they're like, oh, they're going to make me go down for this. And so it's just, there's a nuance. This is where relationship management really matters. Yeah. Your track record and your history and how you think someone would respond to those kind of conversations matters. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely, sometimes I've had customers be like, we are not going to do what you recommend. And then, like, afterwards they'll be like, well, that was a mistake. Mm-hmm. And, like, we'll laugh about it. But sometimes when it's a well that gets a lot of attention because things aren't going right and who said what, and, it can really strain that relationship if you're not careful.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've probably made this even more confusing than the original question, other than to capture how complex this whole thing can be.
Yeah, and the one thing that, again, if you're on our side of the fence, you always want to do whatever you can to protect the relationship, because even if you, again, disagree or whatever the case is that relationship is more important than making the right or wrong decision at the end of the day, because that you want longevity, you want trust. You're going to get bumps and bruises along the way. You're going to have disagreements, great wells, extremely bad wells. But sort of to wrap it all up is at least from my perspective, again, every account manager and business development person has something different, but I always do what I can to foster and to save the relationship for the long-term positive outcome. And so I always have that in mind, is how do I respond today? How is that going to impact my relationship down the road?
Yeah.
And I sort of have that as my sort of North Star and guiding principle, is like, what is this doing to my relationship with this given customer? And then I kind of let that dictate how I move about. So.
Absolutely. I mean, and look, you and I have been at this long enough to know that people move around. The oil field is small and has a long memory. And so you're going to find yourself working with these folks. And even if you might not like each other personally, but professionally, if you can get along and maintain that mutual respect, it's going to matter, because they might get transferred or go work for another company, but they'll turn up somewhere else and you'll cross paths. And, those old memories die hard, especially if it's when, things got tough.
That's exactly right.
So,
yeah. Well, for the listener, hopefully we answered the question, or at least gave you a sort of a under the hood look on the dynamics and things that we deal with customers. But for the most part, it's usually quite positive. And so, you just navigate accordingly, and it's all fun and games. With that said, Matt, I don't have any thoughts or closing last words. We kind of did it all, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we captured it all together, and I'm sure other people are going to just, as they're listening to this, get triggered by some of those kind of who's in charge or those back and forths.
Yeah, so. No kidding. Well, with that said, if you have any thoughts or if you want to add to the story, reach out to us on LinkedIn, or you can reach us at the Flowline podcast at aesfluids.com. Check out the website, all the tech tips, and until next time, folks, be safe out there. Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of the Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.